At this time, I'd like to introduce Milton Chapman, past chair of the Victoria Chamber of Commerce, to introduce our keynote speaker. Milton.
Well, I really have enjoyed the last 2 years serving as the chairman, and it's had a lot of perks. But I got to tell you, folks, and most of you who know me know the reason why I like this. I get to introduce the speaker, and he's from Baylor University, and that's very special to me. And not to mention that, he's also a classmate of mine. A 1984 classmate of Baylor University. And so, you know, I'm very happy. He's a wonderful speaker, and I'm looking forward to introducing him. I told Randy, I said, if we're going to have a speaker from Baylor, I'll introduce him. I want the pleasure of introducing him. Our speaker tonight, as many of you know, is Jeff Reeter. And Jeff Reeter is from Houston. Jeff is originally from James, Oklahoma, and now is the managing partner with Northwestern Mutual in Houston, and is responsible for Northwestern's offices in the southern half of Texas, being in Houston, San Antonio, and Austin. Jeff is a graduate of Baylor's Banquet School of Business and was a wide receiver on Baylor's 1980 Southwest Conference Championship football team, and I was there, and it was really wonderful, guys. You know, not to be surpassed by what happened this year. After graduating from Baylor, Jeff became the youngest managing partner in the Northwestern Mutual System and won the prestigious Managing Partner Achievement Award. He's also a graduate of the Wharton Securities Industry Institute and earned the Sealed U designation through the American College. Guided by his commitment to serving others, Jeff is passionate about a number of community organizations. He now serves on the Board of Regents for Baylor, the Board for the Greater Houston Partnership, the Houston Christian High School, National Christian Foundation, and Liberty Institute. He is a member of the American College Prison Circle and a life member of the $1 Million Roundtable. Jeff is Regional Director for Men at the Cross, member of the CEO Forum, and a member of the Council for National Policy. And as I told Jeff today, one of the things I always like about someone, find out about someone, it's good to find out he's a great family man. He's been married to his wife Cindy, another Baylor grad, for over 25 years. And they have 3 boys, and Jeff has been very involved with coaching baseball, football, and soccer. He's also a deacon and has taught Sunday school at Second Baptist Church in Houston. And as a special note, since we are in a big cattle area, I think Jeff can certainly appreciate it because Jeff bought a cattle ranch for the last 10 years, and then he does some ranching, raising many heads of Romagus cattle. So he can appeal to some of the people who do cattle around here. Even though Jeff has had a great success in building organizations and financial services, Jeff has a huge passion for being a catalyst for growth in the life of others. He's been a popular speaker on achieving success in various avenues of life. So Jeff, we are looking forward to sharing with you some ideas that you can inspire us that we can use. So would you all give Jeff a warm Victoria welcome.
Well, good evening. I'm too loud, I'm sorry. I'll move that down. Is that better? Yeah. Okay. I'm so excited to be here. I tell you what, it's a little, yes, let's switch. We should. Okay. I apologize for that. I take personal responsibility. I'm certain that must have been my fault. But I'm really fired up to spend a little time with you this evening. I will not, we're going to spend about 30 minutes together. And I got to tell you that coming to Victoria, Texas, at this time in history is an awfully fun thing. On your table, I've given you a handout. And I actually put it together last night at about 10:30. Because I got the idea that I wanted to use it, and I had a team around me that are extraordinary, and so they didn't grumble too much. There's a quote here by Malcolm Gladwell, who's a great author in his book, Outliers. And I know you most of us can read. I do pretty well, but I'm going to read it to you. And I want you to ponder this quote, and I want you to think about it as it relates to you Victoria and the time of life that we're in, where we're seated tonight at this in this great, beautiful ballroom. The tallest oak in the forest is the tallest not just because it grew from the hardiest acorn. It is the tallest also because no other trees blocked its sunlight. The soil around it was deep and rich. No rabbit chewed through its bark as a sapling, and no lumberjack cut it down before it matured. We all know that successful people, many like are in this room, come from hardy seeds. But do we know enough about the sunlight that warmed them, the soil in which they put down their roots, and the rabbits and lumberjacks they were lucky enough to avoid? I'm convinced we live in a time that's a really powerful time. It's especially true for this region of Texas. It seems to me that our times are more complicated than ever, though, and there's a lot for us to ponder. In addition to the Gladwell quote, there is a picture of a tree that exists at our ranch a couple of hours north of here in Washington County. We call it Victor's Tree. It got its start in somewhere around 1805, the early 1800s. It started as an acorn. Over the last couple of hundred years, it's grown, and it's become this humongous tree that exists along a river basin that is a powerful reminder to me of a word that I love. The word is Victor. That was my father's middle name, Dale Victor Reeter. My father has passed away, and he was a great, great oak tree type man in my life. He stood for what I believe the state of Texas and this great country and its founders stand for and stood for. The city of Victoria, Texas was birthed about the same time as that oak tree. 1805, as I've sort of read your great history, seems to be about the time that Victoria was named. Now, I think there was a group that came here a little earlier than 1805, maybe 1530, according to your history books. And that group came here because they were shipwrecked. And I ponder that group. I think we have, it's interesting to think about them. They did exist here. They survived here. They liked the river, and they loved the pecan trees. And so that group didn't succeed here, but a group from France, a group from Mexico, a group from Spain, a group from England, all came to try to develop this part of the country as explorers. Back in those days where exploration and the adventures of life were what life was all about. What were those adventurers looking for? What were they thinking about? What was the pursuit about at that time? And the answer was a better life, a new life, the opportunity for abundance. There's a book I love. It's called The Traveler's Gift, and it was written by a gentleman named Andy Andrews. If you haven't ever read that book, you ought to grab it. You ought to read it. It's a really fun, fast read. And it's about a dude named David Ponder that travels through life in history. It's a fiction book, and he lands in the life of historically true people. In one of the vignettes, in one of the chapters, Ponder lands on the deck of a boat, and he can smell the salt water, and he can feel the rocking of the boat, and he's trying to figure out where he is, and a fellow comes up and speaks to him in Portuguese, which he strangely understands. The gentleman introduces himself as Cristobal, and he begins to think through, who could this be? The guy's kind of dressed a little funny. And Ponder, like you and me would be today, figures it out. This is Columbus. Oh my gosh. I'm on the deck of one of three boats, the lead boat. We must be going to discover the new world. It must be 1492. About that time, Ponder stands up, Columbus grabs him and says, "Follow me." Columbus climbs the mast, the main mast of the boat, and takes him up toward the crow's nest. Columbus scurries into the crow's nest, grabs Ponder by the seat of the pants, and tumps him in, and begins looking on the horizon to the west. He looks and looks, and ponders. And finally, Columbus says, "Today, when the sun rises, we will see land." Ponder gets really excited about this until the sun rises and Columbus does not see land. And they have a conversation. You see, Ponder's like you and I. He knows that there's going to be land. Columbus is living in his time in 1492, and he doesn't know that there's land. So Ponder says, "Oh, bummer. There's no land, huh?" Columbus says, "There is land." Ponder says, "Oh, well, show it to me." Ponder says, "Well, I don't see it." And they have this reverse argument, right? Where Ponder says there's no land and Columbus says there is. And finally, Columbus says to Ponder, rather exasperated, "If you want to see land today, you must look in my eyes, for I know there's land, and you can only see it today in my eyes, but tomorrow we'll see land on that horizon." The conversation was riveting to Ponder, kind of astonishing. When they talk further about it, Ponder says, "How do you know there will be land?" And Ponders, here's the answer from Columbus. "When I left the shore, I decided in my heart, there will be land." I had the great privilege of working with some of the most extraordinary people on the planet in a financial services organization in Houston. I say to them a lot that we're just like Columbus. In a world where people are sort of journeying on the ocean, setting sail toward a new vision. But often they lose their sight and they lose their heart, and they need somebody to say, "Look in my eyes and let's go to this new land." And I think that's the spirit of this adventure. I think the city of Victoria and its chamber are entering uncharted waters. My guess is you're headed to a new land. My guess is that this fertile valley around the Guadalupe River that has these beautiful pecan trees and so much about it that's extraordinary, not the least of which are the people in this room. My guess is you're going to win. My guess is the future's bright. I think it's hard to think through that sometimes. My guess also is that the majority of the people in this room are not recipients of Eagle Ford Shale revenues. Now, I think there's a few, and you guys are, everybody's side of chuckles about that, and the ones that are the recipients of those revenues are sort of really chuckling, right? But I think at the end of the day, when the water tide rises, all boats lift. I have the privilege also of serving on the board of the Greater Houston Partnership, which is the Houston, Texas Chamber. And we work really hard on economic development. And we know a little bit about oil and gas and transportation committees and technology and new member acclimation and all sorts of things like this. And it's so fun for me to think about where you're headed in the context of that. And your board, I know some of your board members, Brett Baldwin's one of my great heroes. And I'm so thankful for where you're headed because you're ably focused with tremendous capacity. This Victoria, Texas opportunity, everybody in this room shares, whether we're clipping the coupons or we're going to have to work a little bit harder to get there further. I think about the pecan trees in this river basin, and I think about one of my favorite age-old things. that I think was written a few thousand years ago. Oh, the joy of those who choose wisely, that do not follow the advice of the clueless or hang around those who are making poor choices. And by the way, this is my paraphrase of this age-old thing. They delight in truth, pondering it day and night. They are like trees planted along the riverbank, bearing fruit each season. Their leaves never wither, and they prosper in all they do. There will be wise counsel, and there will be unwise counsel. And you should choose wisely. I'm convinced that this great adventure, this great exploration to the new world is powerfully to be sought. My family has a favorite song, and we've listened to it as we call ourselves Team Reader, which is kind of crazy, 3 sons. And the song is written by a guy named Stephen Curtis Chapman, and it's sort of a ranching song, actually, but it's written, the words of it on our barn in Burton, Texas, Washington County, where we saddle up the horses. And the song says, saddle up your horses. We've got a trail to blaze to the wild blue yonder of God's amazing grace. Let's follow our leader to the great unknown. This is a life like none other. This is the great adventure. I really want to challenge you to ponder why you're here. Partly why you're here tonight, why you're here involved in the chamber, obviously a difference maker in that way. But as you think about why am I here and how did I get here, are you here shipwrecked? Did you get here a little bit like the group in 1530? And you came here shipwrecked and you're going to stay? Or are you just happy to be on this river bottom surrounded by a bunch of nuts? And I present company excluded, okay? But I mean, you know what I mean. I mean, we live in a world today that more and more and more I wake up and I read the paper and I think, holy cow, I'm surrounded by a bunch of nuts. In fact, I've come to the point that I've realized that I'm the weird one. Okay, I mean, in other words, I know I'm not normal because I read the paper, and obviously the majority of these people here are obviously normal, and I'm the weird one. And I'm okay with that, okay? And I'm also really okay with being weird. But I really want to challenge you to ponder where you are and why you're here. I don't think it's an accident. My great friend Doug Dawson taught me about this word providence. He felt so strongly about it, he insisted we name one of our boardrooms at the firm that word. We have 3 boardrooms there: legacy, destiny, and providence. And I think all 3 of those words have something to do with why you're in this room and why you're in this wonderful community with this bright, abundant future. But how do we define abundance? And how do we define wealth? The value of wealth is not in currency that you spend unless it's spent on others. I'm convinced you must choose, by design, not by default, craft a future that is extraordinary. It will not be selfishly realized as extraordinary. Extraordinary only exists in the life of a selfless person. Very few extraordinary people even know that they're extraordinary. They're just givers. They're servant leaders. And I think that opportunity should resonate with you in this room if I know the heart of people that are involved in this Victoria Chamber. I want to close with a story. And I'm 52 years old. A couple years ago I turned 50. Yeah, there you have it. I'm not going to make an age joke there. I'm just going to say anyway, I get it. I got it. Thank you very much. So on my 50th birthday, I pondered what to do that would be sort of extraordinary. And I decided to go on a hunting trip. I invited three friends, three guy friends, to head up to Colorado, to the kind of northwest corner of the state of Colorado, high up in the mountains. And we went elk hunting with bows and arrows. And I love to bow hunt, and it was sort of a big dream life trip kind of thing. I picked my guys, and one was a business partner and a great friend, and one was a neat guy that is a cool leader in America, and then one guy was Joe White of Banquet Camp, who's one of my best buddies. I sent each of the guys something to memorize. And so we memorized something as we headed to the mountains, and I explained to them that this is my 50th birthday trip, and I'm so thankful to get to share that with them, and that I had a real purpose in going there, and that was to rededicate myself to defining extraordinary in a different way. What we memorized was, "He who shaped the mountains, stirs the winds, reveals his thoughts to mankind. He who turns the light of dawn into darkness and treads the heights of the earth, the Lord God Almighty is his name." And we went to the mountains thinking about that beautiful Amos scripture. We got up there, we had a ball, spending some time together, and I explained to my friends that on Tuesday evening would be my evening to really dedicate my 50 years back and 50 years forward. We hunted that morning. I hunted with Joe White, and we went to this awesome place, and I kind of that morning at the end of the hunt built this kind of you could call it a cross between a hunting blind and an altar. And I got there with my pack, and I created a setting. And the beautiful mountain was here, and there was game trails coming down the mountain right past where I was setting up my little camp or my little station. And that evening, that afternoon, I got there early, and I spent some time, and I had what I believe to be the word of truth. I had my journal, which I love. And I spent some time there, and apologize for the personal side of this. Bear with me on it, but I spent some time on my knees, and I spent some time in a journal book writing, and I wrote, thank you for 50 years that are just beyond what I ever would have thought or imagined, and how dadgum fortunate I've been to get anywhere, much less what in God's providence had happened for a pretty clueless young kid from Jinx, Oklahoma, right? And as I wrote, and as I thought, and as I read, and as I went through this process, I literally became emotional that night, and just thinking about 50 years of life, and then thinking about the future. In my journal book, I literally wrote about the future. It wasn't that long, but basically what it said was, how much time I have left, I'm going to move forward in a powerful way, and I'm going to speak to a group in Victoria, Texas, if they ask me to, even though they're probably crazy to ask me because I don't really have much to say. But if they ask me, I'm going to try to go do the talk, right? And I wrote, whether I have 50 more years or 50 more minutes, I'm going to be boldly forward. And I'm going to be different. And I'm going to sell out to what I believe the principles of the founding fathers of this country would have upheld, which I think are a lot like the founders of this great community in Victoria, Texas. At some point, after some pretty lengthy emotional time, it was beginning to get dusk, and the sun was going down, and I thought to myself, it would be, I think I'll hunt for an hour as the sun drops. I thought to myself, wouldn't it be pretty cool if a massive elk came? You know, I mean, that would be cool. God, you know, if God did that, that would be pretty cool, right? I mean, you know, as a hunter would think, right? And so sure enough, you know, I put my backpack back and my journal book and all that up, and I grabbed my bow and I began to do some glass and looking, and I'm looking up the mountain where I know the elk would be coming down, right? And the wind, there's a little breeze coming out of the mountain, so it's really set up just perfectly. And then I began to hear a noise behind me. And I think, well, that's really odd. What could that be? I'm sort of in the middle of nowhere, and that's a very interesting noise. I began to ponder it a little bit more. I mean, to the point that I'm thinking, golly, that is a big elk, if that's an elk, right? And it's not normally, you know, that I've hunted quite a few elk, and I've done this quite a bit, and so none of this is typical. And they're very good at picking up human scent, but I've got this really new scent lock, very cool hunting gear on for my 50th birthday that my sweet wife Cindy has bought me, you know. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, that scent lock hunting gear is working so well because that awesome elk is coming upwind right at me and can't even smell me. It's unbelievable. And I've been crying and sweating, and it's crazy that he can't smell me. Well, he keeps coming, and I'm pretty happy. And sure enough, what I believe to be this massive antlered elk that can't get through the forest because of the size of his rack, it turns out that I got my bow, and I'm on full draw, and I believe that he is going to walk right past a bush that I am set up on about 30 yards away. And sure enough, an animal walks right past that bush that I am set up on, and it is a very large, full-grown black bear. And I have hunted my whole life. My dad took me hunting starting when I was about 4, and I know a lot about these kind of things, and I know what to do when you encounter a bear. But strangely, I didn't do what you are supposed to do when you encounter a bear like this. And so I have got all my gear behind me. The sort of this hunting blind altar is behind me. He came up behind me, and I think, oh my gosh, I'm going to put my bow back over here. I didn't shoot him, by the way, with the bow and arrow standing 30 yards from him on the ground. That wouldn't have been a good idea. And so I turn and I go to put my bow down where I had put it when I was there earlier. When I did that, the bear sensed fear. And the bear on all fours came toward me. And as I put my bow down, I turned around and I realized instantly that I had done the wrong thing. I had on my hip a 9mm pistol. I had it because occasionally when you shoot a large elk, you don't kill it fully, and I carry the gun so that the animal wouldn't suffer. And it's really sort of set up for that purpose, being very close to an elk that's in distress. And it certainly is not suitable for a really large black bear. In fact, to put it in perspective, it would be no different than having a pellet gun in this situation. And he is coming to me, and I'm a little bit like Barney Fife. You remember Barney in Mayberry? You know, I'm pretty sure I got a bullet in there, and you know, and so I'm drawing, you know, and he's coming and I'm drawing, you know, and I'm thinking, and so I am standing, he gets to a log 7 yards from me, and I am shaking so much that it's embarrassing to even admit to the degree of shaking, but I am shaking all over, and I'm holding this 9mm pea shooter, and he gets to this log and he stops. And I make this thought that if he steps over the log, I'm just going to start shooting. Now, what that means to me is that the bear and I are going to die tonight. I mean, he won't die. I'll die first, right? I'm going to shoot my 9mm pistol, boom, boom, until it runs out of bullets, and then he's going to kill me, and then he'll die a little bit later. And I'm really processing this, and I'm like, oh my goodness, this is not a good situation to be in. he gets on his back feet and he stands up, and it was an extremely interesting moment in my life. I have not pondered really what I had been doing previously. It took me a couple of days to read in my journal book the significance of some things that I had written that evening about the future. And for some strange reason, and by the way, I'm also standing there thinking that the bear has no idea what a gun is. I mean, in other words, I'm like this, right? And he's kind of looking at me like, I'm going to eat you. And I'm like, no, I got a gun. And I don't think he cares about that too much. And if he did know anything about guns, he knew it wasn't a very big one. Well, strangely, or maybe miraculously, I took a step toward him. And I don't know why I did that. I don't even know how I did that, quite honestly, because I was too scared to, somebody said, well, you should have screamed. And I was like, are you kidding me? I mean, it's interesting to me. I have a lot of people tell me what I should have done then. And I always tell them, I really appreciate that. But, yeah, you have to find yourself in that situation before you can give somebody else advice on what, But somehow I stepped toward this bear, one step, and he really did turn his head and kind of got a little confused about why I was now moving toward him. And he looked at me a couple of times. He got down on all fours, and he kind of took cover. He went behind a tree and behind some bushes. And then he got in this tree, back up on his hind 2 feet, and he looked at me. The worst part of this whole encounter was this growl, this growl that turned, it was sort of a hiss that turned into a growl that I almost didn't survive. I mean, he didn't touch me, he just growled at me. And it was an incredible moment. And as it turned out, this bear did not obviously attack me. And he kind of went jogging off. And as he jogged off, this neat guy, Joe White, my buddy from Kanakuk, is over this way. And by this time, we have a hunting guide with us. He's over there cow calling. It was sounding like a cow elk. And I'm thinking, oh, that's nice. He's trying to distract the bear and say, I'm a cow elk. Come eat me. That human guy won't taste half as good or something. I don't know. But he watches this bear. He says, I've been guiding for 16 years. That's the largest bear I've ever seen. So I share that story with you. It's a crazy story, and I'll tell you there's a fun punchline for the ranch owner here in a moment. But as I reflected on that story the rest of that week up in Colorado, and what that evening was all about, and the Tuesday night hunt that I had sort of proclaimed was the night that I was going to really think through 50 years and the future also, it just strikes me that he who walks the high places of the earth, and he who cares about what our thoughts are, and he who is the ageless, providential truth that we should lean heavily upon and build relationship with, is a significant thing to ponder as we craft our life going forward. That night we had dinner with the ranch owner, and we were sitting at the table. I almost did not sleep at all that night. I mean, there was so much adrenaline in me, and we were probably a 4-mile hike in the dark back to where we were staying. And the ranch owner, who's a really neat guy, he heard kind of the whole story and all the people had gathered around, and he hadn't said much during that time. And he said his question to me was, he said, "Okay, so let me make sure I got it all straight." And he looks over at my guide and he said, "Tell me about this black bear." The guide says, "Okay, it was this and this, and it was about this high and this tall." And so I said, "Okay, I got that." And he looks back at me and he says, "Now, so again, tell me again. You were carrying a 9mm pistol?" And I said, "Yes, sir." And he said, "Okay." He said, "The bullets in the pistol, were they hollow point?" And I said, yes, sir. That was about the only good thing I had to say. Yes, they were hollow point. I said, "Okay, hollow point bullets and a 9mm pistol, and you were trying to decide whether you should shoot." And I said, Yes, sir. For about 4.5 minutes, I was trying to decide whether to shoot. He said, okay. And then he finally said, out of shot. And I said, seriously? And he said, out of shot myself. So it all could have ended right there. That was his wise counsel to me. But y'all, I'm so thankful just to get to be a small part of your evening. And hopefully I've said a couple of things that you might ponder later. If you happen to stick that beautiful oak tree with the sun shining through it, maybe put it on your refrigerator or a counter at some point, and think back about intentionality and redefining what abundance is. I have an idea that this room, scroll 10 years forward, is going to be an awfully wealthy room. And I don't think it's just going to have to do with monetary wealth. Thank you for your attention.